Good morning and welcome to the Old School, a podcast about a host of things, not least of which education, but also sports, food, travel, culture, and societal trends as it is today. And with me in my endeavor, Dr. Stephen Bourgeois. Good morning, Dr. Bourgeois.
Hey Miller, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. I am fit and I am up and awake and I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Do
Well,
you believe me?
there's always a first time.
I'm normally a fairly jocular individual.
What? That's how
Jocularity, that's the word I learned from MASH.
okay. You see yourself that way.
Well, it helps me with my self-esteem to think of it in those terms, so I'm not a curmudgeon all the time.
It's most of the time.
Well, I wouldn't even say most of the time. I will say, though, when we talk about societal ticks, I am worried about you.
You're worried about me? I'm just quietly going about my business here. Why are you worried about me?
I'm worried about you because you claim to be a sports fan, but you don't watch sports. Matter of fact, you have a whole list of things, conditions, scenarios upon which you will make the decision to dump out of watching a sporting event. I'm just wondering, in your in your heart of hearts, are you really a sports fan?
I've devoted many hours to watching every game possible because somebody has to watch all of them, particularly football games. But no, I'm as you get older and you look at the time passing away, you wonder, is this the best use of my time? Because some of us have foreknowledge of what's going to happen, and that's my biggest issue. I have such a sample of watching games, any type of game. I know what's going to happen, and it unfolds like a tragedy, and I'm seeing it, and that's not a. I mean, it's tragedy. You go through pity and fear, and I don't really want to put myself through that every night. So once I see the outcome is cast, I'll just turn away and read or do something else. But and then once in a while, I'll check in, but I'm almost always right. So it's sort of this strange exercise.
Do you think it is possible that there is value to be gained from watching the entire car crash? By watching the entire drama unfold? Do you think that you as a human being in some way gains from the experience, becomes better as a result of it?
I, I did when pride mattered, and we had say football teams with names like Nitschke and Nagurski, Butkus. Um, but yeah, I think also just seeing the younger generation and the current iteration of professional sports, particularly, I find myself frustrated. So watching it play out, the theme is the same. There's this character flaw in many athletes where they get jumpy and the other team comes back. It's regression to the mean, and there's a fragility that we never used to have in the 70s, at least we as in the sports teams that we watch. I mean, they would put their foot on the neck of the opponent and finish the job. But I see this time in, time out, the same thing, and I quite frankly don't find it that enjoyable. It's more frustrating.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that you have spent a considerable part of your more recent professional endeavors studying motivation and in part studying athletes and having now been given a Windows glance into the psyche, you find that you no longer enjoy what you see. Perhaps it's not been any different than what it was in the 70s, but because you have a more intimate understanding of it, you find yourself no longer intrigued.
I don't know. I think a team takes on the face of their coach to some extent. But what I see out there is that players lose interest in the coach after 2 or 3 years. I mean, we look at at certain franchises, the Los Angeles Lakers, for example, where they have a coach every 1 or 2 years, and there's something to that, where the coach, they can be there, but they sort of lose the team, and so there's this shorter attention span of the athlete to coaching, and I think that's part of what we see in the product we're watching.
Hmm. This may, however, tangentially, this may apply to our topic for today
Wait a minute.
because um,
I thought that was our topic. We were going to talk about how grumpy I am about sports, and I
we can
think I
call we can call an audible if you like.
no. I think if you can transition, because I thought about it for a minute too. You mentioned a topic, and it seems like this could be a little piece of that.
It could be, and it has to do with anxiousness.
Anxiousness. You've never said that word before.
I don't think I have. That's why I'm not sure I said it correctly just now. But it's become a topic du jour because of the efforts of a sociologist, I think, from Columbia University named Jonathan Haidt. And he has come out with a book called The Anxious Generation. And I read an interview with him in the New Yorker. I'm not trying to be better than anyone else. The New Yorker, the interview just popped up as something that I would be interested in, so I read it, and it speaks a lot to the culminating effects of what you and I have talked about on many occasions on this podcast, and that it has to do with the effect of and the influence of technology. So, if you allow me, I want to lay out kind of a basic uh, kind of timeline that he set up in the interview, and and you can stop me at any point, or we can go through it, and then we can kind of dissect it. But I just kind of want to give you a kind of a series of developments that he points to as technology that was at first innocuous, then technology that was much more deliberatively problematic. Okay.
Hmm.
All right.
I think I think I'm ready for this. We have a salad bar set up in my office, so I'll go get a little something to eat and sit and listen. But I'm excited.
All right. So you're bagging on my preparation that I've done at the very onset.
Well, I don't want to encourage this type of thing. Preparing for our no, I'm interested. You had me before you even mentioned technology. So there you go.
Okay. Well, the first thing he brings up is in 2003, 2004, social media, the first social media emerges. And Facebook and MySpace were the two first forays into social media. And it was largely harmless. It was basically catching up with old friends, it was sharing pictures. It was a fairly, in the beginning, it was a fairly innocuous type of thing. Then in 2007, the first iPhone emerged. And initially, it was seen as, and it seemed to be largely used as, although not by me, as a tool. How do you get from Fort Worth to Albuquerque? What is the best way to make um, paella? I don't know, whatever. Whatever thing you wanted to know, the internet was out there and now could be accessed via your phone for the purposes of whatever knowledge you seek to satisfy. The next year, however, the App Store emerged. And then the year after that, in 2009, the various apps that are now being targeting customers start pushing out notifications. And in that same year, Twitter introduces the retweet button, and then Facebook introduces the share function. By 2010, you have the emergence of Instagram, which was solely to be used for smartphones. You have the front facing camera. And now this phone that had become a tool now starts to become a little bit more of a distraction. And then in 2012, 2013, there is a massive spike of just about every bad mental health indicator that you can think of. and it was particularly damaging towards young teen girls. Now, in 2016, a woman by the name of Jean Twenge wrote a article in The Atlantic called "Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation?" And the criticism of the article seemed to be that, one, she was being an alarmist, and two, she had very few years of data which to make her argument. But as time goes on, more and more of the academia class begins to look at how this is shaking out. Sociologist Sherry Turkle said, because of our phones, we are forever elsewhere. And it becomes like a dynamic where our interactions with our phones start to supplant our interactions with actual people. This becomes an even bigger problem because of who now has access to phones. So back in 1998, there was a law that was passed called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And as it was originally conceived, the act would set the age of 16 as the age when kids can sign up for things, can release personal data, can become targeted by corporations for ads and things like that. Unfortunately, as the act made its way, or as the bill made its way through Congress, the age of 16 dropped to 13. And to make matters worse, there was no enforcement of anybody targeting for younger. In essence, if you said you were 13, you got the full frontal attack by corporate America. Now, later, this left this excused companies from responsibility for the children and what happens to them. Once there was a legal erasing of culpability about how notifications and ads and things like that targeting young children, once that was taken off the books, that also kind of unleashed some of the worst aspects of corporate culture. He talks about, and I'm talking about Professor Jonathan Haidt, he talks about that one of the most important things that he did with his class is he would get them to go through their notifications. And he said that his students received, and I imagine ours is not that different, and dogs and everything, causing havoc. But he said that students receive between 200 to 500 notifications a day. And it's because every single app that you sign up for asks for you to allow for notifications. And if you're prone to give them notifications, they will just go ahead and do it without any agreement whatsoever. And so what we see here is that you have younger and younger children being targeted, and I don't mean to use that word in a way of being overly dramatic, but I think it cannot be undersold the impact technology has had to rewiring the brain. And this is basically Jonathan Haidt's uh, premise in this book of The Anxious Generation, is that it has created a disconnect in how we interact with people around us, how we interact with technology. And he says it's particularly harmful for young girls because that retweet function, that repost function, it becomes an affirmation of whatever they posted, whether it's something benign or whether it's something personal or whether it's an attempt for them to try to present themselves in one particular way or in another. That function of likes and retweets and reposts and sharing becomes an affirmation. And it's something that seems to affect young girls more than it affects young boys. Not that young boys don't do it as well, they just seem to interact with it differently. And so this is basically the thesis of his book. And I'm wondering, to what degree does any of that timeline resonate with you based on what you saw in the classroom? Because your time covers nearly the entire spectrum of that development.
Well, yeah, when you're teaching, often there are things going on that you don't really know about. You're not up on it, and so I think I didn't really know much about social media or how connected the kids were in class, and so in our you know old person mind, we thought, well, they're sending text messages. That's a bit of a distraction, and that's another potential notification on the phone. Um, and then maybe I didn't realize that they could have Facebook on an app on their phone, and that I guess that, as you said, is a transition point. But I really never noticed it, teaching until we got together at our charter school where we were working together, and then that's when it started to, I guess, tumble out of control at the previous. I guess I 2009 is when we moved over there. So the time that in between there, the only little hint I had of this was when I was in German class and trying to be funny, and some kid gave me this. I don't know what it was, but a hat that had like a beer stein on it. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to put this on my head. This will be fun. And about every student in the class had their little phones out taking pictures of that moment. Just that instant, I thought, what is this? Yeah, first of
Yes.
all, I didn't know they had phones, and second of all, they can take pictures, and so that was, I guess, my first image of what's really going on.
Mm. One of the things that he makes the point of is that, you and I experience the emergence of technology differently because we had fully developed prefrontal cortex. But the problem is that these kids who were growing up in the early odds and the early 2010s did not have that. And because they didn't have that, they also didn't have a lot of the skills and the tools you use to kind of mitigate the effect of, ads, notifications, things like that. And it turned it into something that was quite addictive. I remember, and I'm sure you remember, because we laugh about it to this day, the meeting where I said, I'm getting the sense that kids are almost addicted to these phones like a drug. And I received the most ambivalent reaction that I have ever received from a potentially problematic revelation, and that no one bought it and no one got it. And part of it is because I was still on the outside. I didn't get a phone until 2013 or something like that, or 2012, something like that. And then, and part of it was because I think everyone else was kind of bought in on the idea that this school, the school that you and I worked at, was one that was going to try to see if we can use that in a different sort of way, and maybe in a better way, an instructive way, or what have you. And it just didn't come across that way to me from the outside looking in.
Well, another moment of just knowing how difficult this was the notion of taking the phone from the kids.
Mm,
And I think at that there was sort of this um, almost, what do you call it in military terms, that you have sort of a deal, an armistice, something where
right.
they can keep them, but but they're not going to be using them, so you can see them. It's kind of a wink, wink. But when you did state testing, and I was in charge of state testing and had to walk around with a big tub to ask them to put in their phones, and I started to realize that this is really hard for them physically. Yeah, and so that's an addictive behavior, to the point where others, I mean, they had kind of had, like, I guess, a burner phone they put in than have their real phone with them, which is a testing violation. And so it was a stressful interaction, but I think that brought out just how difficult um, it would be. And now, um, I mean, we're dealing with some schools who are able to shut it down pretty well, and but there's this transitional phase. Um, and parents are often part of the problem. They're saying, I want to be able to reach my kid any second, if there's some information. And so
Mhm.
they make that argument, forgetting kind of, as you said, the broader argument that this is really hurting their development.
So he makes an analogy. So suppose a demon came to Earth and had three boxes, and the first box was the internet, and the price for this box was about 15 hours out of your week. And he said, he said, how many, he had asked his students, he goes, how many of you guys believe the internet's a good thing? And he said, all of his students felt that the internet is a sum positive. Sure, there's negative aspects to it, but it's a sum positive. It allows you to research all sorts of things. It allows you to learn all sorts of things, what have
These are college students right now.
you. This is college students as he was talking to him right now.
Okay.
And he said the second box was the smartphone. And it would take an additional 15 hours out of your week. But do you accept the box? And he said that most of his students said that they would accept it. The third box was social media. And again, he attached 15 hours a week to it. And he asked how many of his students would take it. And he said that he found that a lot of his students wouldn't take it. And he said that his interactions with the students, because first of all, we're dealing with 45 hours a week. That's a full time, that's more than a full time job. And that's also being conservative as far as the amount of time that we're talking about here. But he said his students would give up social media, but all of their other friends are on it and they can't. They feel like they have to be on it. And because they feel like they have to be on it, and because they feel like they have to do the things that you do on the social media, that causes an issue for them socially, also mentally, or what have you. And so when we talk about the anxious generation, when he writes about it, and when we have talked about it in kind of a secondary fashion with the other topics we've discussed on this podcast, we're talking about a group of people who are trying to handle something that even grown adults with fully developed prefrontal cortexes would have trouble doing. And that has created a individual that is hyper aware of things and given hyper attention towards things that ultimately may not mean that much, but because of social media and because how they're being targeted, everything is hanging on every single thing they do, every single thing they post, every comment they make or picture they post or whatever the case may be.
Well, I mean, what I've run into is 5 to 8 hours a day, um, for kids, and I guess the bigger category would just be call it screen time.
Mhm.
So, you know, 5 hours to 8 hours every day, and there are no weekends for that. Meaning, it goes on every single day. There's not a respite um, at all. And you wonder where it's going to kind of hit its maximum point. And is this going to be a cycle where we'll look back and think, boy, weren't we crazy to do this to our kids? But kids losing their childhood, looking at screens. But I don't see any signs of that. I don't know. Do you?
Well, let me put it to you this way. Ask you a question. There it is true to say that we have more attention now paid to the ill effects that technology and social media has on kids as well as adults, because Lord knows adults are not escaping totally the effects of this.
Oh, not at all.
We have more attention now paid on it and more people talking about it than ever before. Do you think in 10 years that the situation is better, worse, or the same?
It's definitely going to going to change. I mean, the technology supposedly is the saving power, right? To fix the technological problem, you have a technological solution. And attempts such as, giving a weekly report of your own screen time, you kind of look at that and say, oh, okay, well, that can't be right. You keep going, but I think even the notion of the screen in the future is going to change. I mean, that's going to be embedded somehow. So looking at a screen is going to be like us watching a black and white TV set of 13 inches back in the day. So I think that the medium will change so much that it just seems to be enveloping the human. And Marshall McLuhan talked about technology as being an extension of man, and this type of technology is extending in so many different ways. And you talked about it at the beginning, the more modest thing of extending your sense of direction.
Yeah.
I have, you know but now it has to do with your sense, your knowledge, supposedly, um, and it really doesn't end, because I think you're right. The apps were something completely unexpected, that they would take off like that, and now there are so many apps. I would like to do a study looking at how many apps kids have on their phone, because these are individual sources that can draw their attention. I mean, it's not just here I'm getting a text message, and that's
Mm.
just foundation of it.
He made the suggestion to his students. He said, why can't we just have notifications of communication? And then outside of that, like text or email or what have you. And then everything else, we just find out about it the next time we go to that particular app. But it doesn't seem like, because kids often, the joke about the FOMO, the fear of missing out, I think that it really does grip people. I'm not just saying, not just kids, people, that they worry that if they don't get the notification, that they're going to be missing something, and therefore they have to have it. But I mean, if you think about all the apps that you have on your phone, and we both know you have more than I do, but you think about all the apps on your phone, how many of those would you say are actually necessary for you to know about, and how
Uh,
much of it is just a kind of an extension of the interest in the app?
yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm quite comfortable not responding to anything,
Mm.
including text messages, including email. I mean, I'm not as good a correspondent as I should be. Um, but the idea of worrying what's on Facebook, well, I posted about 6 years ago, so I don't know how many likes I'm getting there, and I agonize for a whole day if I post something on LinkedIn. Is
Mm.
everything perfect? And so I never really thought about it that way. That if you have that many apps, they're all, well, you have to have notifications, or you're kind of in the dark, and you could be caught blindsided by something. What I mean, we haven't talked a lot about the what of the social media, but in broad strokes, it's trivial things, and then people um, getting I guess, a siloed effect of what's happening in the news based upon their
Mm.
so all these really dangerous things that are happening, not just with the tool itself, but with the content that they're consuming.
So you think because of the ubiquitous nature of technology in the future that we are headed towards something worse?
Yeah, I think it's um, essentially the mark of the beast. That image works because people know it's not great, but they have to have it. And you've said that a few times. As much as these college kids, you know, consciously can say, "Oh yeah, that's too much. I want to be get rid of some of the noise." It becomes more and more difficult to function. I mean, it's going to be currency. I mean, you reach in and get a credit card, that's going to be a thing of the past. You're going to have to hold that phone up, and it has all your banking information. And so the function is, I mean, it's just growing, and I think it's built to do that. And so there's this infrastructure, or it's I mean, most of these apps are meant to keep your attention. And the
Mm.
more attention they keep, the more ads you get to view. And so we're talking about a economic pressure to keep you engaged and going back. So um, I feel like the in some ways they have tangled or entangled the human
Mm.
by their desires.
I don't want to say this as setting myself up as some sort of example, because for me, I came to this rather late. And so a lot of the things that people are into with regards to their phone, they got into it quite early when it was a fairly innocuous sort of thing before it kind of turned a bit problematic. But so it stresses me out to an extent to watch my wife's phone. If my wife's phone is anywhere near me, I mean that thing brights up like it seems like every 5 seconds, and I don't get it, and I sit there and I was like, it's distracting,
It's
it's
the noise
distracting.
too. It's not
Well,
just it's light, and often there's a little tone,
yeah,
um, kind of Pavlovian.
yeah. So it's distracting, it's annoying, and so I have three notifications:
You do?
text, Signal, which is a communication with my European friends, and then Skype. So those three things I get notifications on, but I get nothing else as far as notifications go. No notifications with regards to apps, not my email, nothing of that nature. My email, I'll just check whenever I feel like checking my email.
Wow.
Um,
You're,
and I don't use my phone to buy anything. I don't take my phone to the gym. The gym's trying to get me to bring my phone to the gym. I was, why the hell would I do that?
well,
I don't.
it has your ID on it. I mean,
Well, yeah. And so I just give them my phone number, and they seem put out, but they offer me the choice, and I'm not going to bring my phone in. It makes no sense to bring a phone into a gym. It makes no sense to bring a phone to a lot of things if you can do without it. And so I really do, it's a conscious thing for me. I really do try to live without it, because I lived without it for so long after everyone else had kind of bought into the trend. And so the fact that I have it, I want to be able to ditch it as soon as possible. Now the problem is now I can only get baseball tickets through the phone, which annoys the hell out of me.
yeah,
But
yeah. They found your weakness.
they did find my
Um,
weakness. Although you can ask for an actual ticket, so you just have to call them back and say, I want an actual ticket. So,
yeah, it's not as
um,
annoying to them as giving your phone number to them at the workout place. I don't have any notifications, even for email, even for text. It's
oh, really? Okay.
basically on sleep. That's a way to so nothing happens. Um,
And I have my phone on silent. I
yeah,
don't want it making any noise. And I just,
yeah.
I guess the text and the Signal thing, I kind of just have kind of, because I do want to talk to my friends, and I know that not my friends can't all come by the house, and so absent of that, then I allow myself notifications as far as people trying to reach me, people that I know and want to hear from. But beyond that, I kind of distance. But the thing about the anxiousness thing, I struggle because I have a kid. She'll be 10 this year. She'll be 10 in a couple months. And it is a constant battle about the screens. You know, she gets between 1 to 2 hours of screen time a day, depending upon what kind of day it is. And she's already asked for a phone. And I said, that will not happen until you're 16. And thankfully, for now, my wife's on board. Why are you laughing?
Well, I'm just waiting to see how long that that lasts. It's an incredible amount of pressure you're putting yourself under for these 6 odd years. We'll see.
There's no we'll see about it.
Okay.
Because you know me, I have an infinite capacity of being stubborn,
Well,
and I'll be damned if this happens before I want it to happen.
well, you said that before you got your own smartphone, if I recall. It sounded like the same thing.
Damn it, you're right. I did say
You
that.
got a flip phone. Yeah, they almost stopped making them, and they're more expensive than an iPhone.
Well, I feel like I was forced into it thanks to our mutual good friend, who, for the time being, shall remain nameless until we can get her on the podcast. But but yeah, I mean, so there have been times where I've had to acquiesce. I don't feel like I'll have to acquiesce here, just because there's too much data now out there to suggest what happens when kids get access to this sort of thing too young. And this book is just it's a synthesis of a lot of these studies that have been done now. Now, he has been criticized and he has been called out for what some people say is a lack of evidence.
Really?
And
What?
he suggested that
Yeah.
he does not have a lack of evidence. There's plenty of studies that back up his point, but he said he's open to alternative theories as to why there's this huge spike, this huge jump in 2012, 2013. He said, "Tell me another factor that would cause it." And that's generally where the criticism starts to fall off. Now, one person said, "Well, the world is shit." And he said, "Well, the world's been crappy for a long time, but no one got anxious about it. You and I grew up in the age of the nuclear bomb and in a possibility of nuclear war, but our generation, for all of its faults, anxiousness is not one of the things that we're known for." And so there have been times, and it's not like 12 and 13-year-olds are sitting there poring over the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal bemoaning the state of the world. So it's not like 12 and 13-year-old girls and boys are not digesting this sort of thing. So it's not like they're that aware of what's happening. And from his point of view, he feels that there's very little else that can explain the timing of it. You could find things that explain the idea of being anxious overall, but the timing of it and the incredible, I mean, it was like a hockey stick. If you ever look at the graphs, you just have the straight line and then all of a sudden it shoots up like Mount Everest. And because it happened so suddenly and because it happened so dramatically, he feels it's really the only explanation. And there's also a lot of studies to suggest that he's correct.
So thinking about anxiety, to me as a researcher, it would be helpful to define that and what is the context, because anxiety can mean a whole lot of different things.
Well, I think, and it's in the most basic sense, you're talking about an uncertainty. You're talking about an uncertainty about oneself, especially in relation to others,
Right.
an uncertainty of the future, an uncertainty of ability. And I think when you talk about anxiousness, I'm not reading from Webster, so I mean I'm sure Webster might have a more concise definition, and we can look that up. But um, for I think for the sake of this discussion, we're talking about a general um, unassuredness about oneself, one's life, one's relation with others. Turns into a fear of others, a fear of situations, a fear of challenges. And it dovetails into a bunch of different directions, which causes individually their own set of tangled problems that we have to try to unravel and deal with.
So there's a broader idea of concern. And, when I think of that, I guess the German word is Sorge.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a little bit into Heidegger with that definition, but that's a more existential concern. The fact that you're thrown into this world and that you're mortal and you're dealing with these existential problems. And I want to make a kind of a connection that that type of Zorga concern is can be distracted by all of these concern, these fear, anxiety on a personal level based upon how people are thinking of you and so forth. So it kind of takes you out of what I think is the real concern, this existential situation, and but it's an incredible ready-made distraction that doesn't go away 24/7.
And because of its rather existential quality, it makes it that much harder to fix and that much harder to reverse,
Uh-huh.
because we're talking about things that are ingrained. We're talking about things that are ingrained in the psyche. I incorrectly said that he was at Columbia. He's actually the Thomas Cooley Professor of Ethical Leadership at the New York University Stern School of Business, and he studies psychology of morality and moral emotions. This is part of his kind of bailiwick. And so I think it makes sense that he focuses on things like this because it deals with how we look at ourselves and how we look at ourselves in relation to others and how that determines our actions. And, hopefully from a business standpoint, he's able to make some headway in maybe teaching business leaders of the future that there can be a different or maybe a better way of interacting with customers. But um, he's also looking at it, he's looking at it from a kind of a multi-layered perspective. Um, but it does leave one to wonder how it will be corrected. If I can answer the question I posed to you, that is, in 10 years, is this going to be getting better, the same, or worse? I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I think we're on the path, perhaps, of maybe just better awareness of it. And I know we talk about the fact that there are some parents out there you just cannot get them to see the danger, and they're the ones giving their 2-year-old the phone. You know, and as a parent, I understand the temptation to do that, but you know, in isolation, that's a problematic move. If nothing else is done to try to make sure the kid is not unduly influenced by that, that's a problem. And I don't want to assume that nothing else is going on that helps to offset that. But I do think that there needs to be a kind of a strict kind of idea about when kids get access to that sort of thing. And 16 sounds like certainly a good stepping stone. But like you said, I mean, there's parents that want to, their parents never had instant contact with them in school, but somehow, they feel like they got to have instantaneous contact with their kids at school. And that's going to be the rub.
Well, they know where their kid is because there's this an app that shows Find My Friends, but it's getting more and more specific apparently, where it's going to now not just they're kind of at this location, but they're exactly in Mr. Miller's classroom right now, or on the way to the restroom, or why are they there? What's going on? I mean, so I think that they first of all don't have a lot to worry about because they know where their kid is, but.
Mhm.
Uh, it would feel odd to send a kid to the office to talk to their parent on the landline. But but there has to. I mean, you've interviewed parents for A Heart Solutions, actually, and
Yep.
I've interviewed a whole bunch of them, and looked at all these open-ended comments, and the parents of schools where they're kind of a cell phone free zone, they're very happy about it. Predominantly they think this is a winner. So I think if there is an entry to make any change, it's with the parents. The intervention needs to start there. And but they can see it because it makes it makes our job as parents much more difficult too, because we don't have their attention it's hard to have a conversation with somebody who's staring at their phone.
Mm,
That's a kind of an image of what parenting has become. In some ways, there are so many distractions, and I mean, in our homes, we're pretty assertive, and we can say, "Put down your phone, I'm talking to you." But the parents aren't doing that, and so I think the parents need the intervention first.
right. Um, yes, I was trying to. I had a thought, and now it's kind of left me. But I think the idea that we have to kind of start with the parents and then move to the kids. But if you talk to the kids, I think we're there already with the kids because I had there was a couple of teachers at my last school, and they would do these little social studies where they would convince their students to go a week without technology. And oftentimes, and I would talk to the students because ultimately sometimes we'd share students, and I'd ask them about it, and invariably they're happier. I mean, the first few days they're anxious. They're even more anxious than they were because they're worried of what they're missing. But the longer it goes, the happier they become because they learn to let things go. And whether this is done because of some sort of fabricated scenario in a classroom, whether this is done by going out camping and hiking for a week, there is a near immediate kind of reaction to what happens when kids step away from technology. When my daughter does something dumb and it leads to, a week off of technology, you can tell the difference in her demeanor at the end of that week as opposed to the beginning of the week. And I allow her to go back to the technology begrudgingly because I know that this is, I mean, even the psychologists say an hour, 2 hours max a day as far as screen time goes. And so I feel like, you know, academically I'm following the right instructions, but even that small amount of time still creates its own problems.
Well, you and I tried to study this. This was like in 2011, 2012, something like that, where we interviewed our own students, and we had permission from their parents and went through the process. We never published on this, and now that it's so old, it would be historical information. Um, but to me, there were two findings. One was that having a laptop, even then, it took too long to boot up that laptop, and students were getting frustrated with having to wait for it. So they'll use their phone and never, don't even open that because they don't have the patience to let the laptop boot up. And the second one,
Imagine if they had dial up, they would just go
yeah, oh yeah, right. And the other was a single comment from a student because we were kind of raising some of these concerns about how they're going to be um, just dominated by technology. And the kid said, I think maybe it was to you or to me, but said, Mr. Miller, or at that time, Mr. Burgess, uh, it's going to be okay. Remember that? I think we both interviewed the kid. So it's going to be okay. I thought, okay, there we go.
It is something to kind of be mindful of because every generation has worried about what the younger generation is into.
Yes.
And every older generation has predicted doom and gloom. And it does make one pause, but you could also point to the rather singular phenomenon that is technology the way it exists today. And it is singular when compared to rock and roll or television or whatever the past fears were. This does seem to be something on a whole new level at an unprecedented impact.
Well, Hammerler, that almost sounded like a mic drop there. I didn't want to jump in. This has been informative, and I'd like to at some point have our two pastor friends come back in and give us their perspective on the students that they serve as well,
Yeah.
because they would have a and maybe we can even talk to that fabled elementary teacher. Are they using technology in the third and fourth grade? Because they probably are. A lot of kids.
Das geschieht niemals auf Erde.
Well, we're here from this earth. Yes.
Oh well. Well, it is an interesting book, and we're certainly not here to shill for it. He is making the rounds. He's making
Oh,
the rounds so much, it's quite possible he could show up on this podcast here pretty soon.
oh,
But
so you're gonna link it.
yeah,
What's the name of this hateful man?
Haidt, Haidt.
Jonathan Haidt.
Yes, and so
Terrible names.
yes, and he has written a couple of books. The Coddling of the American Mind was a book he wrote a couple of years ago, and talking about the phenomenon that he was seeing with his students, and also what's happening in universities.
Okay.
He's a very interesting individual with a very good gift at explaining things, and I find him intriguing, and I certainly can't help but agree with many of his conclusions. And so, whether you do or you don't agree with the conclusions that we're drawing out of this podcast episode, it might be interesting to read nevertheless. It's called The Anxious Generation, is the name of the book. But so, with that, we go back to a summer of sports that you are not really interested in, and see where we go from there. And
Well,
God willing, there will be a Canadian team that will win the Stanley Cup.
I hope you're right. And these are just the dark days of summer until football season starts. So any signs of depression that we're showing here, it's just waiting until the preseason is over and actual football starts in that first weekend in September.
Well, if you're looking for salvation, you don't have to wait quite that long, as we are now in the midst of baseball season,
Oh, it's baseball.
and baseball has its own therapeutic qualities. And so I would recommend you availing yourself of that.
We need to run the theme music like about 5 seconds ago to kind of run over this baseball thing.
It's just like the Academy Awards; they start the music after you ran too long.
That's pretty good.
All right, with that, I shall say adieu, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Auf Wiedersehen, Herr Miller.